What happens when enemies fall in love? They fight harder, they deny longer, they hurt deeper, and when they finally surrender, they love fiercer than anyone else could. Saskia Van Der Berg, a Dutch South African climate scientist with ice in her veins and fire in her arguments, had spent 5 years publicly dismantling the work of Indira Kapoor, a British Indian environmental economist whose pragmatic approach to climate policy made Saskia's blood boil. Their academic feud was legendary: panel discussions that turned into verbal warfare, op-eds that read like personal attacks, a mutual animosity so intense that conference organizers seated them on opposite sides of rooms. Then a prestigious research institute forced them to co-lead a year-long climate initiative in Iceland. Isolated, unavoidable, inevitable. This is what happens when the person you hate most becomes the person you can't stop thinking about. Saskia Van Der Berg didn't believe in compromise. At 46, she'd built her reputation on uncompromising data and uncomfortable truths. Climate change wasn't a problem you could negotiate with or manage incrementally. It was an existential crisis that demanded radical action, and anyone who suggested otherwise was either a coward or a sellout. People like Indira Kapoor, for instance. Indira's latest book, The Economics of Gradual Change, a realistic approach to climate policy, sat on Saskia's desk like an accusation. Saskia had already written 3/4 of her scathing review for Nature Climate Change, and she was enjoying every word. Her assistant knocked on her office door at Utrecht University. "Dr. Van Der Berg, you have a video call in 5 minutes. Dr. Herman from the Arctic Research Collective." Saskia glanced at her calendar, frowning. She didn't remember scheduling this. But Johan Herman was an old colleague, so she logged into the call. Johan's face appeared on screen, looking uncomfortable. That was never a good sign. "Saskia, thank you for taking this meeting on short notice." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. In fact, something's very right. We've secured major funding for the Iceland Climate Initiative, the 3-year research project we've been developing, full funding, facility, staff, everything we wanted." "That's excellent news. Why do you look like you're about to tell me my dog died?" Johan sighed. "There's a condition. The funders want 2 co-directors. They want your field expertise and data modeling combined with economic policy analysis and implementation strategy. They want science and economics working together from day one." Saskia's stomach dropped. "No." "You haven't heard the name yet." "I don't need to. There are only 3 environmental economists working at this level, and 2 of them are men I can actually tolerate. That leaves Dr. Indira Kapoor," Johan finished. "She's already accepted. The question is whether you will." Saskia stood up, pacing her office. "You're asking me to spend a year working with a woman who thinks climate catastrophe can be solved with carbon trading and gentle regulatory nudges. A woman who prioritizes corporate comfort over planetary survival. A woman who has the most successful track record of actually getting climate policy implemented in the real world," Johan interrupted. "Saskia, I know you two have history, but this project needs both of you. Your research is groundbreaking, but it stays in journals. Indira's approach may be incrementalist, but she gets legislation passed. Together, you could actually change things. We'll kill each other within a month." "The facility in Iceland is large. You'll have separate labs, separate offices. You only have to collaborate on the research direction and final outputs. Think about it, a year of fully funded research in one of the most climatically important regions on Earth. When will you get this chance again?" Saskia looked out her window at the Dutch countryside. Johan was right, and she hated that he was right. This opportunity was unprecedented. "I wanted in writing that I have equal authority over research methodology," she said finally. "Already done." Indira insisted on the same clause. Johan smiled. "She was as enthusiastic about this partnership as you are." "Perfect. We're starting from mutual loathing." At least that's honest. 3 weeks later, Saskia arrived in Iceland to find the research facility was beautiful and remote, exactly what she needed. What she didn't need was to find Indira Kapoor already there, setting up her office like she owned the place. Saskia had seen Indira at conferences, obviously, but seeing her here in their shared workspace was different. Indira was 44 and looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine editorial on powerful women in STEM. Dark hair cut in a sharp, shoulder-length style, warm brown skin, elegant features, wearing perfectly tailored charcoal trousers and a forest green silk blouse. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in any room. Saskia had dressed for fieldwork, practical fleece, weatherproof trousers, hiking boots. She suddenly felt underdressed, which was ridiculous because they were literally in the Arctic. Dr. Van Der Berg. Indira's accent was crisp, British with subtle Indian inflections. Punctual. I appreciate that. Dr. Kapoor, I see you've already claimed the office with the better view. I arrived first, early bird and all that. Indira's smile didn't reach her eyes. Shall we establish ground rules? I propose we divide the project into clear domains. I'll handle all economic modeling and policy framework. You handle environmental data collection and climate modeling. We coordinate on integration points but otherwise work independently. That's not collaboration, that's parallel play. Would you prefer we work together on everything? Share office space, deba? 2 months in, their careful avoidance strategy was working, mostly. They shared the facility with a small support staff, but worked in separate spaces, communicated via email, and managed to go entire days without direct interaction. But Iceland had other plans. The storm hit on a Wednesday evening, one of those Arctic tempests that turned the world into howling white chaos. The facility's support staff had left for Reykjavik that morning, planning to return Friday. Saskia and Indira were alone when the power failed. Saskia was in the field lab when the lights went out, and she swore in Dutch while fumbling for her emergency torch. The backup generator should have kicked in immediately. When it didn't, she grabbed her parka and headed for the mechanical room. She found Indira already there, wearing an impractical cashmere jumper and examining the generator with a torch. It's frozen, Indira said without preamble. The fuel line. We need to thaw it, but the storm's too severe to go outside. There's a portable heater in storage. We can set it up here, but we'll need to stay with it. Generator rooms and space heaters are not a combination you leave unattended. They worked together in tense silence, setting up the heater, monitoring the thaw process. The facility was getting cold fast. These buildings were designed for power-on occupation. We should move to the common room, Saskia said after an hour. It's the smallest space. We can use the fireplace and close off the rest of the facility. Indira nodded, and they gathered blankets, food, and water. The common room was cozy with the fire going, but the storm outside was apocalyptic. They could be stuck here for days. I'll take first watch, Saskia offered. Sleep if you can. I'm not tired. Indira settled into the armchair across from her, wrapped in a thick blanket. And this feels absurd, us sitting here in silence just to avoid conversation. What would you like to discuss? How your approach to climate policy is essentially rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic? Ah, yes, your favorite argument, that anyone who doesn't advocate for the immediate collapse of global capitalism is complicit in planetary death. Indira's tone was sharp. Tell me, Dr. Van Der Berg, how many of your radical proposals have actually been implemented? How many governments have adopted your recommendations? Just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's wrong. And just because something feels righteous doesn't mean it's practical. Indira leaned forward. You write brilliant papers that win awards and change nothing. I write compromise policy that actually gets passed and actually reduces emissions. Which of us is really helping? Incremental change isn't enough. We're past the point where we can negotiate with physics. And revolutionary change isn't possible if you alienate everyone with decision-making power. You can be right and ineffective, or you can be pragmatic and functional. I chose functional. You chose comfortable. You chose not having to fight powerful interests who don't want real change. Indira's eyes flashed. You don't know anything about what I've fought. You don't know what it cost me to get a seat at those tables. You think I enjoy being called a sellout by people like you who've never had to compromise on anything? I have compromised on what? Your principles, your research, your comfortable academic position where you can publish provocative papers and collect awards while never having to implement anything in the messy real world. The words stung because they were partially true. Saskia stood up, too agitated to sit. At least I'm honest about what's needed. At least I don't dress up inadequate half measures as solutions. And I don't indulge in performative despair that paralyzes action. Indira stood too, facing her. You want to know what I really think, Dr. Van Der Berg? I think you're brilliant and you're a coward. You're so afraid of failing to save the world that you won't even try to save parts of it. You'd rather be purely right than partially effective. And you're so desperate to be relevant to power that you've forgotten what actual change looks like. They were standing close now, both breathing hard, and Saskia realized with a shock that Indira's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You think this is what I wanted? Indira's voice was quieter now, raw. You think I dreamed of being the person who negotiates how slowly we allow catastrophe? I wanted to change everything too. But I'm 44 years old, and I've watched every radical proposal I believed in die in committee. So I learned to ask for what's achievable. I learned to celebrate small victories. And yes, I learned to compromise. Because some progress is better than perfect paralysis. Saskia felt something shift in her chest. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You never asked. You just assumed I was the enemy. The fire crackled in the silence. Outside, the storm lasted 3 days. By the time the support staff returned and power was restored, something fundamental had changed between them. They still disagreed, constantly, but the disagreements felt different. Productive, like they were working toward truth instead of victory. They started having coffee together in the mornings, started eating lunch in the same room, started actually listening when the other spoke instead of just waiting to counter-argue. Saskia learned that Indira had grown up in Birmingham, the daughter of immigrants who'd worked brutal hours so she could have opportunities they'd never had. That she'd been the only woman of color in most of her graduate programs. That she'd been called too aggressive when she advocated strongly and too accommodating when she compromised. Indira learned that Saskia had lost her younger sister to a tsunami caused by climate-intensified storms. That her radical positions weren't performative but personal. That she lay awake at night terrified that her daughter would inherit an uninhabitable planet. I have a daughter too, Indira said one evening over dinner. Priya, she's 19, studying environmental law at Oxford. She tells me I'm not doing enough. She smiled sadly. She sounds like you, actually. She sounds smart. She is. She's also angry. At me. At her generation's prospects. At the world we're leaving her. Indira paused. When I negotiate policy, I picture her future. I'm trying to give her something livable, even if it's not perfect. I picture my daughter too, Lena. She's 14. Saskia's voice was quiet. She asked me last year if she should bother planning for the future, if there will be one. I didn't know what to tell her. They looked at each other across the table, two women carrying the weight of impossible responsibility, and something unspoken passed between them. We should combine our research, Indira said suddenly. Actually combine it. Not parallel work, integrated work. Your environmental modeling showing what's physically necessary. My economic modeling showing what's politically possible. Finding the overlap. That would require us working together, closely. Yes. We'll argue constantly. Probably. It might not work, or it might be exactly what this project needs. Indira met her eyes. What do you say, Dr. Van Der Berg? Ready to actually collaborate with your enemy? Saskia felt her pulse quicken. When had Indira stopped feeling like an enemy and started feeling like something else? On one condition, Saskia said. We stop being so formal. We're going to spend the next 10 months working together daily. Call me Saskia. Indira. Her smile was genuine, warm. Though I reserve the right to call you Dr. Van Der Berg when you're being particularly stubborn. That's fair. I'll call you Dr. Kapoor when you're being insufferably pragmatic. They laughed, and it felt like something was beginning. The work became all-consuming in the best way. They'd start working at 8 a.m. and look up to find it was midnight, both of them bent over models and data, arguing passionately about methodology. But now the arguments built towards something instead of tearing it down. Saskia started noticing things, the way Indira chewed her lip when she was concentrating, how her accent got stronger when she was excited about an idea, the elegant movement of her hands when she talked, the way she looked at Saskia sometimes like she was a puzzle worth solving. One night, working late on integrating their climate projections with economic scenarios, Indira suddenly said, I need to tell you something. Saskia looked up from her laptop. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. That's the problem. Indira set down her pen. These past months, working with you, it's been the best professional experience of my career. Your mind is extraordinary. Your commitment is inspiring, and I find myself looking forward to our work sessions in a way that feels unprofessional. Saskia's heart was racing. Unprofessional how? You know how. Indira met her eyes. We're supposed to be enemies. We're supposed to hate each other. Instead, I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about data, wanting to make you laugh, feeling proud when you compliment my work. And I don't know what to do about it because you probably still see me as the sellout economist who compromises everything you believe in. I don't. The words came out before Saskia could think. I haven't for months. I see you as someone brilliant and principled who's fighting the same battle from a different angle. Someone who challenges me to be better. She stopped, afraid to finish the sentence. Someone you what? Someone I can't stop thinking about either. Indira stood slowly, walked around the table to where Saskia sat. This is complicated. Very. We're colleagues. We're co-directors of a major research project. This could be a disaster. It could be. Saskia. They tried to keep it professional at first. Separate offices, no obvious affection in common spaces. But Iceland was small and isolated, and they were terrible at hiding what was happening between them. The support staff figured it out within a week. Finally, the lab manager said, the tension was killing all of us. They worked harder than ever on the research, but now the work was infused with something else, joy, partnership. The knowledge that when they disagreed, it wasn't warfare but collaboration. That when Saskia pushed back on Indira's assumptions, Indira would consider it seriously instead of defensively. That when Indira challenged Saskia's models, Saskia would refine them instead of dismissing the critique. Their research was groundbreaking. They'd found a framework that showed which radical interventions were economically feasible under which policy conditions. They'd identified specific leverage points where bold action could cascade into systemic change. They'd created something neither could have created alone. We should present this together, Indira said one morning, 6 months into their partnership. At the International Climate Conference in Copenhagen next month, joint keynote. Saskia looked up from her coffee. You want to present together? In front of everyone who knows about our academic feud? I want to present together because this work represents both of us, and because I'm tired of hiding what we've built, both the research and... She gestured between them. This. You want to go public about us? Don't you? Indira's expression was vulnerable. Or am I misunderstanding what this is? If you want to keep it private, keep it temporary. No. Saskia took her hand. I don't want temporary. I don't want hidden. I'm just surprised you do. Your career, your reputation. There will be talk. Let them talk. I'm 44 years old and I've spent my entire career managing other people's perceptions. I'm done. Indira squeezed her hand. I want to stand on that stage with you and present our research and let everyone know that the great academic enemies found something better than competition. I want them to see that different approaches can complement instead of cancel each other. And yes, I want them to know I'm in love with you. Saskia's breath caught. You love me? Of course I love you. How could I not? You're brilliant and passionate, and you make me want to be bolder. You've changed how I think about everything, not by convincing me I was wrong, but by showing me there was another way to be right. Indira's eyes were bright. So yes, I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid. Saskia kissed her, cutting off the words. When they separated, she was smiling. I love you too, even though you're still occasionally too pragmatic and you drink terrible coffee and you organize your files in a system that makes no sense. And I love you even though you're impossible stubborn and you leave equipment everywhere and you think 3 hours of sleep counts as a full night's rest. Indira laughed. We're a disaster. We're perfect. The Copenhagen conference was everything Saskia had feared and hoped. They presented their integrated framework to a packed auditorium, and the response was electric. Questions went for over an hour, multiple research groups wanted to collaborate, funders approached them about scaling up, but the moment Saskia remembered was afterward, at the conference reception, when a journalist asked about their dramatic shift from adversaries to collaborators. Indira looked at Saskia, smiled, and said, Turns out the person you think is your enemy might actually be your perfect partner. You just have to be brave enough to find out. Then she took Saskia's hand, right there in front of everyone, and the flash of cameras didn't matter because Indira was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Later, in their hotel room, Indira said, No regrets? None. You? None. Indira pulled her close. Though I am curious what happens now. The project ends in 6 months. We go back to our universities, different countries. Or we don't. Saskia had been thinking about this for weeks. Utrecht has been trying to recruit a climate economist. I could recommend someone brilliant and accomplished who I happen to be in love with. You're asking me to move to the Netherlands? I'm asking if you'd consider it. If there's a version of our future where we don't go back to separate lives. Indira was quiet for a moment. Priya's at university. My parents are settled in Birmingham. There's nothing tying me to the UK except inertia and habit. She smiled. And I've always been curious about Dutch climate policy. Very progressive. Is that a yes? That's a, let me see the job posting before I upend my entire life for a woman I once considered my professional nemesis. But Indira was laughing. Though yes, if the position is real, if the opportunity is genuine, then yes. I want to build a life with you, not just a research partnership. Good, because you're stuck with me now, for the work and for everything else. I can live with that. They fell asleep tangled together, two women who'd learned that sometimes the person challenging you isn't your enemy. They're your future, asking you to be brave enough to change. What happens when enemies fall in love? They build something neither could have built alone. Saskia and Indira's integrated climate framework has been adopted by 12 governments and influenced policy across 3 continents. Their research institute in Utrecht is pioneering new approaches that bridge radical environmental necessity with pragmatic economic reality. But more than that, they built a life. They still argue, constantly, passionately, about everything from research methodology to whose turn it is to cook dinner. But now those arguments end with laughter and compromise, and the knowledge that being challenged by someone you love makes you sharper, not weaker. Indira was right. Sometimes your perfect partner is the person you thought you couldn't stand. You just have to be brave enough to stop fighting against them and start fighting beside them instead. Have you ever had someone go from your least favorite person to your favorite person? Someone who challenged you so hard you fell in love? Drop your enemies to lovers story in the comments. Follow for more mature WLW romance celebrating brilliant women who refuse to settle for anything less than extraordinary love and extraordinary work. Because the best partnerships challenge you to be better. Drop a heart if you believe in love that makes you better.